doing another Reading Rush video. I wasn't sure if I was going to try for every day, but so far I am 2 for 2 book-wise, so we may as well keep trying this. So, second book of the Reading Rush. This time I've read Winter World. To be fair with this one, I was like halfway through it to begin with. But on the other hand, I've had this book in my Kindle Unlimited since February. So, this one counted for the prompt of reading a book that's in a genre you want to read, which was technically not true, but some people were interpreting that as like a genre that you don't read a lot of because it doesn't really interest you, so you're just sort of trying to find the ones that do. It's kind of what it felt like. And this book was just, it was just not to my taste at all. At all. So, this is a space book in a lot of ways, and it's got space battle at the end. There's a little bit of time on Earth, so I was also thinking of counting it for the prompt of reading a book that's set in another continent, because that part all took place pretty much in Africa. Anyways, I don't do space books. I just don't. I like sci-fi when it's close to modern, and generally it has to involve genetics as well, because I studied genetics in school, so that's the science that I'm interested in, and seeing kind of like extrapolated on and where our fiction can take us with that. This was definitely not that. This was all space travel and high-tech stuff that's pretty much just not what my brain likes. So that it just didn't have that going for it to begin with. It was overall a fairly easy book to read. Like, the writing style was easy for me to get into. I didn't mind the characters overall. They were, fine, kind of generic characters. But I will say that especially in the section of the book that I was reading for the Reading Rush, which is like 50% of the way in, when they're on Earth, I was thinking about it in light of all the stuff that's gone on recently with like Black Lives Matter and trying to make sure we're having more diversity and representation and stuff. And all I could think was that this book was such a white man's book. To be fair, it's written by A.G. Riddle, and I did not look up if that was a guy or a girl. But, so, the basic premise of the story is that the world is undergoing this long winter where basically the world is freezing over, and they end up having to move, like, to the equators to have anywhere to survive, even as it's getting colder and colder. And it ends up being caused by, like, aliens and stuff, the space travel things that go on. But they end up in like 3 major areas. One of them is like Russia and India, and they've taken over like Iran. One of them's the Philippines, I think, and it's a lot of Asian stuff, like Australia, China, all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of in that area. And then you've got like the US and a lot of European countries that end up in Tunisia, which is in Africa. And the characters end up going to Africa and are part of that part of society that's gathered there. But despite the fact that it's in Africa, where there should be black people, as far as I know, in Tunisia, not a black person is mentioned in this whole book. Other nationalities are mentioned, but usually just as there was this mild communication barrier and we had to get a translator kind of thing. But no black people are mentioned whatsoever. And all of the world leaders, especially in the area we're talking about, are the US and all these European places. And I was just like, come on, you've got this chance to represent all these different cultures because of this premise that you're going for. And what do? None of that. There was not a black community that was represented in any of those big national groups. And it was so frustrating with all of that stuff going on recently to be like, why am I even reading this book? This representation is horrible and non-existent, and I'm so frustrated by it. I probably wouldn't have noticed that kind of thing before so much has happened with the Black Lives Matter and people trying to make sure their reading and stuff is more diverse, and me personally wanting to focus more on that. But now that it's in my head, I'm reading this book, and I was like, this is so stupid. I don't want to keep reading this. But I did finish it because I was like 50% of the way through, like I said. So there's that. And there were also a few other minor issues I had with the storytelling too. A lot of the timeline feels like it's very under pressure. They keep saying they're running out of time because the world's freezing over. They're trying to figure out how to communicate and or destroy these aliens, make contact or whatever. And so there's a lot of times where it's like, we're running out of time, we gotta make this work. And then especially in the part that I was reading, it'd be like months passed. And you're like, this does nothing to help, especially if it's just a throwaway line. Why does it matter if it's months? And it doesn't add to any of the urgency that I'm sure the story was trying to have, because, I mean, you are kind of running out of time when your world is freezing over. So, I had some issues with that. And then it was also unclear how even any of the measures where they got all those cultures together in their 3 separate areas, how any of that setup even really could have been established. I mean, it was partly that the main characters we were focusing on were in space at the time when those things were formed, because they were investigating anomalies in space, trying to figure out what was causing the long winter. But then they come back and there's just all this setup. There's bunkers and things that have been built and set up. Were these already there in place in Tunisia? Is it like a militaristic society? I don't know. It was just like assumed and implied that it all worked out. And how did they get food if this was going on for so many months and the world is freezing over? What are you people eating? Questions. They did talk about like food supply in the story, and that like food supply was running low at various points, but they didn't like address what the food even was that they were eating or how they were eating, because they kept making points about how they didn't have energy to do things like greenhouses and stuff, and they didn't save any animals because they just seemed like extra mouths to feed when they were trying to move people to a place that was warm enough for them to survive. And so frustrating. Anyways, hopefully my next read in the reading rush I enjoy more than this. I'm pretty sure I will, because all the others are actually in genres that I read and are books that I was actually interested in and wanting to read, instead of ones that I was given to me by my boyfriend on my Kindle Unlimited and were like, read this. And then it took me over 6 months to do it. Or like exactly 6 months. Anyways, it's been a long while, and I'm glad to be done with the book. It was very satisfying to return it to Kindle Unlimited and be like, I don't have that book on my list anymore. Even if the book itself was overall very disappointing for me and not at all to my tastes. So I don't think I'll be going back to the space sci-fi. But if you have any recommendations for like genetics / more modern, slightly sci-fi, future sci-fi kind of stuff, that's where my jam is at. So if you've got anything like that, let me know. Comment down below and give me some suggestions of some better sci-fi than this was. But that's all I've got for now. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day 2 of the reading rush, and a great rest of the reading rush just in general. This is the Umlaut Harper signing out.